Alright, okay. Assalamualaikum and good morning to UPSI staff, and also perhaps other staff not from UPSI who join us today. So welcome to PEKA Academic Talk Series 1. Let's start our academic talk with bacaan Umul Kitab Al-Fatihah. Amin, amin, ya Rabbal Alameen. So, thank you to Dr. Bibi for the introduction. Again, I'm Dr. Fariha from the Faculty of Languages and Communication, your MC for today. Right, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests and colleagues, it is my great pleasure to introduce to you our distinguished guest speaker for today, Associate Professor Dr. Muhammad Fakri Zaky Jaafar from the Faculty of Design and Architecture, UPM. Allow me to share the background of our esteemed guests. So Dr. Muhammad Fakri Zaky bin Jaafar is an associate professor at the Department of Architecture, Faculty of Design and Architecture, UPM. He graduated from the University of Manchester, UK, with a Bachelor of Arts in Architecture in 1993 and Bachelor of Architecture in 1996. Immediately upon graduation, he worked as a graduate architect with a few architecture firms in Kuala Lumpur and Malacca before joining UPM in 1999. In 2009, he completed his doctorate in built environment at the University College London in the UK, specializing in thermal comfort in homes. His other research interests include sustainability, self-help housing, and energy efficiency in built environment. He is also an accredited Green Building Index facilitator. In the department, he is currently teaching environmental physics and advanced building technology. He has conducted and still conducting a few research projects, especially in the environmental science. In 2011, he was appointed the position of Deputy Director of Research and Innovation. And in 2012, he was a member of a delegation from UPM to visit the Silicon Valley in the USA to study its innovation ecosystem. From 2013 to 2017, he was the Deputy Director at Putra Science Park UPM Innovation Arm, managing promotion and marketing of innovations. From 2020 until 2024, he held the position of the head of the Department of Architecture, Faculty of Design and Architecture, UPM. Currently, he is a full-time lecturer and a researcher at the department, while at the same time running an innovation startup under the UPM Incubation Program. So please join me in extending warm welcome to Associate Professor Dr. Muhammad Fakri Zaky Jaafar in sharing his professional views on the topic of reductionism overdose in Malaysia education system. Please welcome Dr.
Okay,
Muhammad
thank you
Fakri.
very much, Dr. Nurul Fariha. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Nurul Fariha for the introduction. And I would also like to thank Dr. Bibi for making this talk happen today. Just for a bit of background information, I and Dr. Bibi, we shared several WhatsApp group, and we have been talking about general issues in education and knowledge for quite some time. And on the side, personally, we have also exchanged ideas, and discuss the things we have been discussing. So perhaps today, I think this is the first time I have a public talk on this particular issue. And I would like to thank Dr. Bibi for inviting me, for arranging for this talk to happen today. Okay, a little bit about the title. I put the reductionism overdose in Malaysian education ecosystem. A bit of disclaimer, actually my talk is not purely or solely on education, but since when we first discussed about this talk, I had the impression of to give this talk to UPSI. So I think a little bit of focus on education might be relevant. But in fact, as we go through the lecture, you will realize the topic being discussed covers all aspects of um, civilization, and not only in Malaysia but globally as well. So perhaps this the title is just a bit of apa kita cakap clickbait for to entice people to listen to this talk. Okay, I have prepared a text for the lecture because, like I said, this is first time I'm laying out these ideas in a public lecture. So I have to make sure that I have a good narratives, a good sequence, and covered all the relevant aspect meant for the talk. So during this talk, I will be talking about reductionism and a little bit of some background information of how I came to be interested in this topic from my background. And then over the years, I have gathered some literature on what reductionism is and what are the opinions of scholars everywhere on the topic of reductionism. And perhaps I share some of my readings regarding the types of reductionism. And then perhaps a little bit extensive on the consequences of reductionism and the rise of reductionism, why this happened, why are we so engrossed and so in love with this mode of thinking. And eventually at the end, it's a bit of a synthesis of how we move forward. But again, another disclaimer, I would not claim that what I proposed in the end is the answer to reductionism, because the issue encroach wide areas of human activities. So it's not fair for one view to really dictate the way forward. But I believe at the outset, for any problem that we face, the first thing to do is to identify the problem, to look at the problem and to really acknowledge it is a problem, because as it is, reductionism has not yet been identified as a problem. In fact, it has been hold dear to many people that it is a good way to move forward. Okay, so let me start with the first slide, Dr. Bibi. Okay, much has been said about Malaysian education system. Currently, it is plagued by issues of degradation of quality of education in schools. Of late, the issue of non-attendance for SPM exams, the issue of complex pedagogy and inappropriate complexity seems to be continuing unabated. Our downward slip in PISA ranking, etc., etc. It is not the intention of this talk to dwell on these issues. We know the problems, people talked about it, but let me swerve this talk to what are the possible causes of these problems. Okay, next slide, Dr. Bibi. The problems we see in the current education system has parallel in many other aspects of civilization, economy, politics, business, religion, health, etc. They all seemingly to have myriads of crises in different scales strewn about the whole modern society. They are reflected elsewhere in the world, so it's not just about education. However, they share the same characteristic that is plaguing every aspect of modern world, and this can be summed up as the fragmentation of phenomena resulting in the loss of richness of events, humanness, and big picture mentality. Here, there's next slide. Here, here the story of 7 blind men and an elephant comes to mind. While everyone got it correct in their own small way, yet none of them have a holistic concept of an elephant. So this is just a metaphor of what this is all about, that we have different views on fragmented aspect of a problem, be it in education, civilization, anything. Okay. Looking deeper, I find that the ills and maladies are just a manifestation of a deep-rooted belief lurking in modern minds. It is a crisis of perception. It is a systemic problem. It is not administrative, not strategic, not even operational problem. It might not even be a philosophical problem. It is a problem of our worldviews, our paradigm, and sprung out of misplaced emphasis on specific aspect of modern philosophy. Although the root is philosophy, but we would see that this habit of mind, I would say this habit of mind is everywhere across many philosophies. Okay. Specifically, I will talk about a certain mental habit that sprung out of the enlightened modern mind. It is called reductionism. It is a mode of thinking and analysis that consists of two important stages. The first tendency a reductionist mind would do is to break down a phenomenon into its small constituent parts. Secondly, to select parts which are easily measurable, observable, and to discard those parts which escape quantifiable scrutiny. Yet, one of the biggest problems when we talk about reductionism is that to many people, including the brightest minds out there, it is not a problem. It is, in fact, a good way of thinking for the modern mind. It brings about objective truth, efficiency, productivity, and clarity. So that's a bit of a dilemma there. We may detect this problem in many ways when we complain about the crisis in education, when we see people could not agree on simple matters, when we complain about highly bureaucratic nature of our organizations and universities, when we see our policies and initiatives do not yield expected results, when the world cannot agree on problems like resource depletion, climate change, or even war and genocide, when we see the loss of meaning and value in our universities, that's when you can bet that reductionism is laying at the foundation of the problems. A big part of this talk is about persuading the connection between reductionism and modern society's problem. Because this is the thing with reductionism. It breaks connections. It operates in small isolated realms. So successful it is that one may be convinced that such a problem of genocide in Gaza right now has nothing to do with what we have been doing for the last 100 years. In fact, they are interrelated. Okay, let me backtrack as to where this interest comes from my journey as a researcher when I was doing my doctoral study in the University of Manchester. As an architect, I was looking at the notion of comfort in a building for humans. Specifically, I was looking at the problem of thermal comfort. I found that in determining the science of human comfort, there are two different paradigms to choose from, and they have different implications. Okay, we are looking at the same phenomena, but there are different ways of looking at it. The implications cannot be ignored. It dictates how we use energy to achieve comfort, and it leads to carbon emission, global warming, so on and so forth. One would lead to a bigger appetite for energy consumption, causing higher emission. It would, however, create a predictable, stable, and homogeneous way of life. It is preferred by cultural bias rather than its relation to truth. Well, the other paradigms will lead to a lower need for air conditioning, but requires inclusion of differences in culture, climate, and context. It requires a mindset quite different from the first paradigm. The first model is a reductionist one, where the definition of comfort is approached by breaking down the components into measurable parameters. As such, complex and non-measurable factors are left out or being normalized in the investigation. The reductionist mode looks at the interplay of only 6 parameters, namely temperatures, radiant temperatures, air velocity, humidity, metabolic rates, and clothing insulation. The samples are normalized to white European males sitting in a climate chamber in Denmark. So when they did the study, the students have to sit for at least 3 hours in a climate control room because they want to eliminate all these other parameters that is dynamic. In this model, psyche, culture, mood, and other physiological anomalies are omitted. Also omitted is real life condition where all the parameters fluctuate. In the steady state chamber, the temperatures or the parameters under investigation are kept constant for a few hours. But in real world, it fluctuates. So this is one of the big telling of the flaw of the system. Nevertheless, the resulting algorithm is quite accurate in predicting comfort sensation, provided all the other complex parameters are predetermined or normalized. Okay, next slide, please. Another approach in determining comfort is called the adaptive approach. In this approach, responses are taken from a large number of samples and taken from real-life scenarios. It uses black box approach of comfort model. The result shows that in the real world, people have the capacity to adapt. They have cultural capacity, they have psychological capacity, and that comfort cannot be standardized for various culture, various climate, and psyche. Instead of predicting specific range of comfort, the adaptive approach allows for a wide range of thermal conditions for people to be comfortable in. This results in less need for air conditioning. This reduces demand for energy and carbon emissions. The results from these two different approaches are significant. The reductionist model results in 40 to 50% higher requirements for air conditioning compared to the adaptive approach, which is more holistic. The implication is that carbon emissions, the cost of global warming, and depletion of resources is higher using the reductionist model. Nevertheless, the widely adopted approach until recently was the reductionist one, since it is closer to science, even though it results in less than satisfactory solution. This opened my eyes to the question, are there any other human endeavors that is problematic due to blind adoption of reductionist thinking? Well, at first I thought I stumbled onto something new. Apparently not. The issue has been highlighted by many other scholars of the 20th century. Here we can identify two components of reductionism. First, it will break down a phenomenon into smaller parts. Second, to focus only on those parts that is measurable, observable, and quantifiable, as is in the temperature, humidity, air velocity, so on and so forth. This can be illustrated by the steady state thermal comfort approach discussed earlier. The phenomenon of quantifiable components, while intangible, complex factors are ignored or normalized. As a result, the wonderful capacity of humans to adapt to a wider range of environmental conditions is ignored. Today, we see the results of this everywhere. Since air conditioning are introduced with the European sense of comfort, buildings are designed regardless of climate. We work in an air-conditioned office which require European clothing. People in shopping malls in Kuala Lumpur wearing jackets and hats as if we are in Europe. After my PhD, I did not think much about it. I was on my way to make a living as an architect. And then when Asia was hit with the financial crisis of 1998, the construction sector was the first to feel the heat. Not much work coming in, so I joined academia in 1999. This is when the question re-emerged in my mind. Instead, what I saw is the systemic crisis in academia, from the bureaucratic nightmare, the shallowness of ideas, the highly mechanistic but hollow epistemological scholarship, unimpactful research output. And in my mind, all these bear resemblance to the problem I saw in my doctorate that the reductionist approach would bring. All right, before we go further, a little bit of types of reductionism out there. Again, sorry for the spelling error there. My apology to Dr. BB. Okay. Methodological reductionism is when we use reductionism as a method. For example, we want to study the factors affecting the growth of a plant. Okay, we reduce it to the parameters relevant to the study. But after the study, we go back to various aspects of plant growth. So it's just a method. There's nothing wrong with that type of reductionism. A bit of a problem when we start to adopt epistemological reductionism, where we start to adopt reductionism as the way of knowing the world. And for example, we start to use scientific reductionism in social science or arts because we think that is the valid way, the only valid way to know truth. Okay, and then ontological reductionism. This is the question of being, of what things really are, and it can, as I would like to propose, encroach into the issue of belief and religion. Okay, of people trying to understand something in terms of its material appearance instead of its metaphysical meaning. And then material reductivism is when we start to think that only the material world exists. Okay, that there's nothing behind atoms and interaction of atoms. Okay. Another interesting aspect that I found during my reading is upward reductionism. This is almost like the inductive aspect of reductionism, where once we have made an opinion, we have reduced a persona into something. Whatever empirical results that we see would not affect our belief to that persona. For example, we might have seen that somebody who had the characteristic, or who talked about, something good and something lofty, we start to reduce him to that persona, that he is or she is like that. And even whatever he or she did that is contrary to what he says, we still believe the person instead of what he did. Okay, so just a little bit of background on that types of reductionism. Okay, I think we miss. Okay, all right. So we look a bit at reductionism as it is found in literature. Reductionism often attributed its origin to René Descartes, a French philosopher of the 17th century. It is also sometimes called the Newtonian or Cartesian approach to thinking, after the name Descartes. It is the belief that reality can be understood by its constituent components. As such, one sees this in the basis of scientific thinking. It is the beloved child of modern science. It has produced wonders. It propelled men to the moon. It cures diseases. It is super powerful. Such a stellar performance leads to a situation where it is adored beyond its true worth, and therein lies the problem. Reductionist thinking insists on the proposition that truth can be established bottom up, that smaller components can explain bigger things. The position of this belief can be summed by this proposition. We might have heard this. Life can be explained by biology. Biology can be explained by chemistry. Chemistry can be explained by physics. Physics can be explained by mathematics. Therefore, mathematics can explain life. Okay, that's a little bit of simplification of what it is, but maybe we get the idea. This is why sometimes this approach is referred to as Newtonian worldview, since he relied on mathematics to explain the world. It also views the world as a mechanical clock or mechanical duck, where its behavior can be predicted by understanding its individual parts. That is why sometimes it is referred to as mechanistic worldview. René Descartes in 1962 claimed that non-human animals could be explained reductively as automata, meaning essentially as a more mechanically complex versions of mechanical duck. Why did Descartes reserve this to animals? Because to him, the metaphysical aspect of man is still relevant, is still real, it still exists. Okay. From another standpoint, reductionism can be described as the belief that the world can be explained by understanding the behavior of atoms and molecules. Hence, the word atomism being referred to describe this approach. Another facet of the modern mind that is corollary to the reductionist mindset is scientism. Scientism is almost like a religion. It is not an empirical or objective way of looking at things. It is not an objective method of inquiry, but rather resembles a religious belief that sprang from overconfidence in the scientific method. An unfortunate development of scientism is that it starts to creep beyond the domain of natural sciences from which it sprung. Hughes in 2012 described this phenomenon thus: it is frequently claimed that natural science does or soon will constitute the entire domain of truth, and this attitude is becoming more widespread among scientists themselves. All too many of my contemporaries in science have accepted without question the hype that suggests that an advanced degree in some areas of natural science such as in physics, chemistry, biology, or even engineering, confers the ability to pontificate wisely on any and all subjects. Okay, then he highlighted the air of arrogance in scientism, that we begin to think that scientists has the answer to all the world, all the real world problems, and they should be able to say something on all aspect of life. Okay, next slide, please. This is why we could see those who rise to prominent position and hold key decision in academia or educational or any other institution are those from the natural science background: scientists, biologists, chemists, engineers. Okay. The criticism against this thinking, next slide, please. Well, now we go to the criticism against this kind of thinking. Can often be summed up by the proposition that the whole is more than the sum of its part. It is the opposite of what reductionists believe. The reductionists believe that the constituent parts can explain wholly the outcome of a phenomena. But the criticism is this, that, for example, when you see musical notes, if you take the notes by itself, it does not mean anything. Only in the way when you put them together, you can bring about beautiful composition, beautiful music that move people, so on and so forth. By adding notes and rhythm instead of just a collection of sound and noise, a musician can produce a masterpiece. So it is not simply just a collection of different frequencies at different intervals. Okay, it's more than that. Next. A canvas and several color paints in the hand of an artist will create an amazing painting. The outcome can never be predicted from the size and types of canvas or the chemical properties of the paints. Its quality cannot be inferred from the physical properties of its constituent. This drawing was by Monet, and it was priced at 65 million USD at Christie's, the famous auction house. No amount of scientific analysis of the color or the canvas could explain why it fetched such a price. Yet, to reductionist world, Monet does not exist. Even in scientific fields, reductionism cannot account for emerging properties of natural phenomena. Especially with the advent of quantum physics, Newtonian model of the world crumbles. Collection of cells, neurons, and bones cannot account for the life of a biological entity. Biology cannot explain why the lung could provide breathing if all it looks is at the cells. Reductionism cannot explain the emergent properties of natural phenomena such as color and sound, which plays a significant role in building human civilizations. Due to these and many other issues, wholesale adoption of reductionist mindset in the whole spectrum of human endeavors results in the loss of touch with reality, loss of the richness of phenomena, and render our effort meaningless and unimpactful in the least, or worse, it could create wider chaos and crisis if unchecked. The real world, whether nature or man-made, man-induced, are complex interaction of endless entities. The study of complex dynamic systems has uncovered a fundamental flaw in reductionist method. As South African philosophy professor Paul Celius discussed in 1998 book titled Complexity and Postmodernism, according to him, by cutting up a system, the reductionist method destroys that which it is trying to understand. Due to these shortcomings, scholars and scientists working in various fields and backgrounds has highlighted the drawbacks and harms of this way of thinking. We now look at some of the literature that has been discussing about this issue. Next slide, please. Fritjof Capra, a physicist himself, he believes that the ills of modern world, war, hunger, environmental degradation are the results of Cartesian Newtonian worldview. The banishment of metaphysics, the intangible from modern knowledge, the intangible from the modern knowledge resulting in solutions that solve small problems but create bigger ones, such as energy crisis, pollution, unemployment, public health, etc. These, according to him, these problems are all different facets of one and the same crisis, and that this crisis is essentially a crisis of perception. Like the crisis in physics in the 1920s, it derives from the fact that we are trying to apply the concepts of an outdated worldview, the mechanistic worldview of Cartesian Newtonian science, to a reality that can no longer be understood in terms of these concepts. We live today in a globally interconnected world in which biological, psychological, social, and environmental phenomena are all interdependent. To describe this world appropriately, we need an ecological perspective, which the Cartesian worldview does not offer. Next, Peter Singer, he is one of the proponents of system. He said, "Today, I believe our traditional consensus regarding the goals and processes of public education leaves us dangerously vulnerable in a world of increasing interdependence. We have all been taught to break apart complex problems and fix the pieces. Our traditional education process, indeed, our theory of knowledge in the West, is based on reductionism, fragmenting complex phenomena into component parts and building up knowledge of the parts. Moreover, our traditional system is based on competition and individual learning." Next, another scholar, Vandana Shiva, she's an activist, environmentalist, author. She puts quite harsh view on reductionism. She puts forward the view that reductionism is not only the basis of the technology, but also a violent ideology that tears apart human knowledge through epistemological politics. She stated that the violence done by reductionism is in four forms. First, it is violence against the subject of science. It is violence against the object of knowledge. It is violence against recipients of knowledge, and it is a form of violence against knowledge itself. Next, this is Sheikh Umar Farooq Abdullah, a Muslim convert and a scholar in Islamic sciences. In a lecture in 2018, Sheikh Umar Farooq highlighted the corruption of faith, loss of belief in the unseen as a result of reductionism. This is the reason why Islam has lost its profundity, because a large part of Islamic belief cannot be reduced to materiality. Okay, next. Can we get the whole picture, please? Okay, this is another view by Professor Ian McGilchrist. He is a linguist. Initially, he was then he went on to psychiatry, and he looks at the problem of reductionism from the perspective of. Sorry, we lose the slides. Can we try to get back the slides, Dr. Bibi? Okay.
Sekejap tu saya telah dia sometimes bila saya move this dia take me off out of Chrome, that's why. Hold on, yeah.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Okay, we look at another perspective. Reductionism has always been an important mode of thinking since the earliest human. This is how Professor Ian McGilchrist described it. It has its benefits. When early men went for hunting, he needed to focus his attention on the prey. And he looked at the problem from the perspective of neurology, that is the division between the left and right hemispheres of the brain. So when early men went for hunting, he needs to focus his attention to the prey. He needs to be quiet, need to be accurate, need to be fast. He needs to cast away any other thought that is not relevant to his hunting at the moment, for the moment. So much so, at that point, he might not even be aware of other predators that might be stalking him instead. But once he got the prey, it is important that he switch back to his right brain function, be aware of the general environment, decide the safest and quickest way to get back to his cave to avoid danger. He need to think how to divide his catch with the rest of the tribe. He need to think of the people he love and care. So in a sense, the right hemisphere is the master that will chart what the left hemisphere should do. It looks at the life in wider and bigger perspectives, so one can really make informed wise decision of what one should do at particular time and context. In this instant, he uses his reductivist mindset as a method to efficiently get his object of desire, the prey. But once the task is done, he switches back to the right brain mode of thinking, which is more holistic in his outlook. So this is how Professor Ian described the issue in his book Master and Emissary. He proposed that although both mode of thinking is important, it is the right hemisphere should be the master and the left is the emissary, because the right has the advantage of big picture systemic thinking, while the left is meant for grabbing and manipulating the material world. The problem we have today, according to him, is that the emissary has now become a master. The material reductivism we see today has led to the situation where the left hemisphere has taken over our worldview. Looking from this perspective, McGilchrist identified differences between the left and right brain hemisphere. He suggested there is an actual neurological basis between holistic, the right, and reductionistic brain mode of thinking, the left. He notices the reductionistic tendency of patients whose right brain is damaged, incapable of big picture, transcendental, and sometimes ridiculous way understanding real-world phenomena, similar to people who are left brain dominance. He narrated an interesting episode regarding a dialogue with a patient with right brain damage. First, he asked the question, is it cold or hot in the Bahamas, a tropical country? And the patient swiftly replied, it is hot since it is in the tropic. And then he asked the question again with an extra premise. He said outrightly, tropical countries have cold climate. Bahamas is in the tropic. Is it hot or cold there? And then the patient answered, it is cold. But why do you think it is cold? Because you said tropical countries has cold climate. So this is seems a bit, maybe we think it is funny, but this is how some of the crises, I believe, happen because of this left brain dominance. This is an example of reductivist mindset where the focus of the syllogism is limited to the parameters offered, regardless of truth. Here we might find similar episodes when dealing with people who are left brain trained, such as those in natural and physical sciences and engineering to a varying degree. Reductionism in education. Okay, next slide, please. So there are people who laments the problem of reductionism in education. One of it is Vygotsky. He said that we can suggest ways in which reductionism and its denial of values and standards could affect the curriculum in craft, design, and technology. A really consistent and radical reductionism would interpret technology as no more than physics and chemistry and would deny that it has a level of its own, of efficiency and effectiveness, which is not to be found in inanimate nature untouched by human or animals. Wrigley Terrace wrote an essay dwelling with the problem of reductionism in education. Sorry, that was the quotation by Wrigley Terry. Now, the quotation by Vygotsky in 1925, sorry. Any principal distinction between animal behavior and human behavior is obliterated. Biology devours sociology and physiology devours psychology. Human behavior is studied as the behavior of a mammal. What is essentially new, what consciousness and psyche brings in human behavior is ignored. I mean, humanness is ignored. By ignoring the problem of consciousness, psychology has deprived itself of access to the study of some rather complex problems of human behavior. It is forced to restrict itself to explaining no more than the most elementary connections between a living being and the world. Okay. All right. a word on Bloom's taxonomy. This might be a bit controversial, but to me, Bloom's taxonomy itself is a reductionist paradigm in education. Human is broken down into cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. Now, teachers have to focus on specific aspect and really not care enough about the holistic person in the student. A teacher in math is not required to care for the student's athletic ability. A teacher in science wouldn't have to worry about his students' social skills, etc. The thing is, to produce a holistic person, don't chop him up in the first place and try to stitch them back together. What we get is not a holistic person, but a Frankenstein monster. I was in a talk given by a scholar in education where he lamented, we have come up with beautiful division of cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. The problem is the teachers do not know how to bring all these qualities together in a student. Well, that's very rich coming from a scholar in education. To me, this statement is blatantly arrogant and funny. It was the scholars who chopped him up in the first place and expect regular teacher to stitch them up, while they themselves did not offer a meaningful way of stitching up. Next. And another flaw of reductionism was highlighted very recently. It was during COVID crisis. During COVID crisis, reductionism was singled out by Clement as the main reason global community failed to come up with appropriate response to the crisis. This is what this scholar said. Scientists with media presence thinking in reductionist terms, together with the politicians who are advised by them, have followed a virus-centric reductionist approach thus far. Similar to previous pandemics, this has also ethical consequences as the question emerges whether avoidance of infection at any cost should outweigh other human values such as basic civil rights or social contacts that are essential for children and the elderly. Okay, so those are some of the criticism against reductionism found in literature. But then again, like I said, we should not view this talk as outright assault on reductionism. It is part of the way how we think about the world, and it's just the problem is emphasis of imperfect or imbalanced way we do things with regards to the choice between the right and left hemisphere. Okay, next. All right, I would like next to try to trace the rise of reductionism in human history. It begins very early. If I would like to pick the episode of the golden heifer or the golden calf. Okay. Before we talk about reductionism, we have to understand the origin of the banishment of metaphysical forms in modern mind, and this can be traced as early as human civilization. A case of material reductionism, which happens very early in human history, is familiar to Abrahamic religions. In Christianity and Islam, we have this story. Remember the story of Samiri and the golden calf? When Musa alayhi salam went to Mount Sinai and left the tribe under the care of his brother Harun alayhi salam, Musa Samiri, a tribe member, managed to sway the people's belief in God by introducing a golden calf as an alternative object of worship. This is, to me, a prime example of ontological reductionism, and that it is within the human psyche since its birth, this tendency to go against God. The need to believe in something that is tangible, physical, and material, and this tendency is not a good one. Okay, next. We can also trace the distrust against metaphysics in Christianity. In 1517, Martin Luther wrote 95 theses. The title is Disputation of the Power and Efficacy of Indulgences. Protesting against the exploitation of the people by the church first began to remove the metaphysical significance of religious authority. Back then, the church sold these indulgences where you can redeem your sin by buying this slip called indulgence from the church, and the church make money out of this. Okay, so Martin Luther was fighting against that and gave rise to the Protestant movement. This removal of an intermediate party was soon followed by John Calvin, who died in 1509. The idea of reducing the meaning of salvation to individual toils and labor. Now, Calvin agrees with Martin Luther that it's up to a person to have salvation with God. There's no intermediary. The church should not charge anything for this process. Soon Calvinism was born in 1550s, and the idea would to focus on the amount of wealth one accumulate from their hard work. So Calvin reduced the meaning of salvation into hard work, how hard we work to save ourselves in this world. So it is an evidence of salvation. So we should work hard to be safe in the hereafter. Soon Calvinism was born in 1550s, and the idea would mutate to focus on the amount of wealth one would accumulate from their hard work. Hence, eventually, salvation from hell has been reduced to the amount of wealth one to acquire. So wealth is a product of hard work, and hard work is a sign of salvation for an individual. So this assumption has moved from higher level of meaning into eventually it becomes to accumulation of wealth. And from then on, it is said that the spirit of capitalism was born. Okay, so we see here ontological reduction happens on multiple levels. This would soon lead to the diminishing relevance of metaphysics in modern mind. In 17th century, come along Descartes, who crystallized the duality of mind and body, which essentially divide metaphysics and material world definitively. This division between mind and body would be the first instance where reductionism has a prominent method of viewing the world began to rise in the Western mind. While he does not deny the existence of God, God became less relevant in the world. Soon God would take a backseat in the worldview of Kant, Hume, and Bacon. Eventually, Nietzsche would declare God is dead. The modern world that followed from enlightenment of Europe would see the triumph of empirical material world when Europe, with its technological achievement, began to conquer the world. Their superior production system and technology enabled them to go far and wide in search of colonies to exploit resources and to fire modernization. Such scientific method had proven to be the foundation of modern science, and the triumph of the modern world is attributed to it. So much so that reductionism starts to take on epistemological level. This is when truth from a branch of knowledge is used in another branch of knowledge. That the conceptions, theories, and laws of one branch of science can account for and explain without remainder all the phenomena and processes studied by another. This is a quotation from Allen, if I'm not mistaken. Allen, which therefore is denied any distinctive conception, theories, and laws of its own. So there is a tendency for the scientific method to encroach on other domain, other discipline of knowledge without reservation. Okay, I would like to trace the start of encroachment of natural sciences in the arts and humanities to the article by C.P. Snow in 1959, entitled The Two Cultures. He lamented the backwardness of social sciences and humanities compared to the objectivity of physics and other natural sciences. He would term the scholars in arts and humanities with the degradatory term Luddites, people or simpleton, orang kampung, so on and so forth. From then on, as if driven by guilt, humanist scientists began to mimic the approach, concept, or even methods of natural science into humanistic sciences. Today, we in academia are reeling from this attack. When research universities concept was introduced in Malaysia, the humanities felt the heat from the insistence of measuring impact and contribution a la science disciplines. Okay. Next. So from the literature review, we can conclude that reductionism, overdose are driven by this what we call dark tendencies in my analysis. Okay, the tendency towards heresy, as we see in the Golden Calf episode. I would also propose laziness is part of it, because when viewing a phenomena, it is easier to assume it is only made up of by small observable components. We don't want to deal with the metaphysics or the intangible qualities of phenomena, because it would be too much. Whereas human has the capacity to deal with those issues. For example, when you are in an interview, the term lazy is not in the sense that somebody who don't want to do work, but somebody who wants to do it simply and quickly, and quick fix mentality. When in an interview, a reductive person would look at the data in the CV and would not even look at the interviewee. I happen to experience such thing myself in an interview for something. There is an interviewer who would not even look at me, but look at the tables, the forms I submitted, and ask question without even lifting up his head. But another interviewer look at me with passion, with focus, because he is trying to read what kind of person I am. And to some people, this takes energy, and this is so difficult. So it is easier to just take the information, to just treat the phenomena from the empirical evidence laid on the table. So that's what it means by laziness. And then we see greed. This is another something I would like to argue, that if we put, for example, performance in terms of measurable, quantifiable KPI, then greedy people would start to have this gaming mentality of focusing on those small aspects and ignoring all the rest uh, of the whole social interaction in an organization, and focus on those small compartments of normally measurable numbers, so that they can achieve they can get the promotion, they can rise in organizations, so on and so forth. Okay, and also when Calvin reduced the meaning of salvation into wealth, Calvinism, Calvin himself did not say that, but Calvinism, the belief by his followers, start to put wealth as the objective of salvation. Then we see greed start to breed, where people start to be hungry for money, not for the value that money is bringing, but some of them go for money just because money itself, and not for the values money brings. Okay, and also when reductionism is rampant in an organization, it is being adopted, and people with insecurity like it, because it is almost a corollary of the laziness aspect of an individual. The insecurity mean by that a person who cannot really grasp the meaning and value of phenomena, it's easy for him or her to focus on those small aspects and become a confident person. He has to ignore social communication. He has to ignore, for example, if you are so focused on energy, you ignore the environment. You can become expert on energy, but without any knowledge about community or environment, so on and so forth. Okay, and this leads to vanity. People with insecurity, lazy people can rise in ranks by focusing on those small components. Okay, next. Now we look at the some of the symptoms of the problem that arises out of reductionism. I found quite a few in the literature. One is the phenomena of street light effect. Okay, this street light effect is a dumbing down effect. A dumbing down effect. A person was, this is can be inferred from this story. It originates from some Muslim tradition, but now it has turned into street light effect. It is a dumbing down effect. A person was seen looking for something under a street light. When asked, he said he was looking for a ring that he dropped. Curious, the inquiring man continues, "Where did you drop it?" "Over there," pointing to a dark place away from the street light. "Then why are you searching here?" asked the man. "Because it is dark over there." Although this sounds funny, this is what the reductionist mind does. For example, let us take a look at our food security issue. Okay, food security issue, to me, it is a question of society, of culture, of our habit. It's a socio-economic and political issue of allocation of land, so on and so forth. But most of our research, we look at, the science of agriculture. We look at the engineering parts of the machines. We look at the science of horticulture, fertilizer, water quality. Of course, these are important. But when we identify the problem is beyond science, we could not do anything about it because it's not our domain. We still try to look at the technological aspect of the problem. Okay. All right. Next, and we have the problem of rain of quantity. As we might have noticed over my talk, there is a tendency to look to be fixated on numbers and quantity. Okay. When you are presented with the freedom to select only a small aspect of phenomenon out of a myriad of aspects to ascertain its truth, it is much easier to choose those which can be measured or quantified. This tendency has been pervasive since the rise of empiricism. This can be illustrated by McNamara fallacy. The McNamara fallacy is often considered in the context of Vietnam War, in which enemy body counts were taken to be a precise and objective measure of success. So the way politicians think when they want to do a report, it is the number that is important and how many people died, the enemy died. By increasing the estimated enemy death and minimizing one's own victory was assured. Critics noted that guerrilla warfare, widespread resistance, and inevitable inaccuracies in estimates of enemy casualties can thwart this formula. So it is problematic because there are many other aspects which has been ignored. McNamara's interest in quantitative figures is seen in the Project 100,000, that is by lowering admission standards to the military, and enlistment is increased. Key to this decision was the idea that one soldier is, in the abstract, more or less equal to another, and that with the right training and superior equipment, he would factor positively in the mathematics of warfare. U.S. Air Force Brigadier General Edward Lansdale reportedly told McNamara, who was trying to develop a list of metrics to allow him to scientifically follow the progress of the war, that he was not considering the feelings of the common rural Vietnamese people. So when McNamara was drawing up this list, this Brigadier General noted that, hey, you don't take into consideration the reaction of the people in Vietnam, how they would react. This would have implication on the outcome of the war. So McNamara wrote it down on his list in pencil and then erased it and told Lansdale that he could not measure it, so it must not be important. So that's another aspect of it. When it is not measurable and quantifiable, you would have somehow believed that it is not important. But when the McNamara discipline is applied too literally, the first step is to measure whatever can be easily measured. The second step is to disregard that which can easily be measured or given a quantitative value. The third step is to presume that what can't be measured easily really isn't important. The fourth step is to say that what can't be easily measured really does not exist. This is suicide. This is what is quoted by the book. An example of this is the unfortunate impact of the use of GDP as a measure of prosperity of nations. When it was introduced by Simon Kuznets in 1937, it was simply a tool for measuring the US production of goods during the war. However, the policymakers loved the idea of numerical indicators to measure the socio-economic health of the country. This is something not intended by Kuznets. In fact, he warned that it should not be used as a measure of welfare. So today we see all the crises in the society. It does not measure equality, health, education, environmental degradation, and so on. So that's what GDP does not measure. Okay. So today we see all the crises in society and environment in the name of economic growth, which means nothing more than the annual rise of GDP. Okay, next. Oh, it's already almost 1 hour. I think I will try to rush my talk to finish maybe in half an hour. Detachment of meaning and values. Another problem is detachment of meaning and values and real life from adoption of reductionistic tool and mechanism. In Malaysia, if we read the Falsafah Pendidikan Negara, it has all the ingredients to develop an all-rounded citizens. However, the product, the outcome of education system so far proved to fall short of all expectancies. I believe this is not the flaw of the objectives and philosophies stated in the Falsafah, but in the mechanism and tools used to achieve those objectives. Just look at the mechanistic characteristics of our education, teaching and learning tools. We have OBE, HOTS, CGPAs, STEM, so on and so forth. These are just tools, but it has its consequences. These are all tools which seems to be scientific and modern enough, but it carries with it all the pitfalls of reductionist approach. This can be attributed to the fact that reductionism do away with metaphysical forms. As such, values, meaning, lofty physical ideas such as in FPN would not survive the process and the mechanisms. It is the process and the mechanisms that kills it. An example is the ever popular case of KPI gaming in higher education. When pressed with the need to measure impact of investment in universities and its R&D, KPT, through the adoption of MyRA, My Research Assessment, assume real values are in the numbers of certain metric. Scholarship are measured by the number of publications produced, H index, impact factor, the number of students graduated, the amount of research grant acquired. Innovations are measured by the number of patents filed. The peak of this assumption is that the higher the ranking number a university is secured, the better it is as a seat of knowledge and innovation. The irony of this game is while all the metrics show improvements in numbers, the real impact of scholarships and innovation are left wanting. The analogy of Cobra effect is apt here. The story goes like this. In colonial India, there was a district where life of people was endangered by cobras. The British decided to solve this problem by giving monetary reward for every cobra caught. Here, the focus is on the number of cobras being caught. Okay. The assumption is that the more cobra caught, the less there are in the surrounding villages and the safer the people will be. Unfortunately, instead of catching wild cobras, scrupulous people start rearing cobra, they menternak cobra and send them to the authority to get the reward. We might argue this is the case of greed and reductionism, and not reductionism. But look closely. Here what had happened is an ontological reductionism, when the safety of villages has been reduced in meaning to the number of cobras being caught. The same can be said when scholars in local universities are hard-pressed to achieve certain number of publications as a measure of scholarship. Instead of focusing on the real-world impact of their knowledge, now it means number of publications done. Okay, next. Another problem we can see that we see every day is the term working in silos. When reductionist mind fails to connect their attention to factors beyond their limited scope, we have the tragedy of working in silos scenario. As has been illustrated in the COVID crisis management earlier, different parties could not see and respond to the need of other parties even though they are trying to work in the same objectives. Referring to the photo, once I was trying to walk in Kuala Lumpur in Bangsa from Jalan Ma'ruf to Jalan Riung by walking along Jalan Bangsa. The supporting pier supporting the ramp above suddenly blocked the pedestrian path and I had to walk right on the tarmac against unseen oncoming traffic. So this is right smack in the middle of the pedestrian pathway and you have to walk onto the tarmac and you cannot see this car coming from the opposite side. Imagine if you are on a wheelchair and what would happen. We can imagine the parties involved here, the engineer who designed the road, the structural engineer who designed the supporting pier, DBKL who provided the walkway, the owner of the nice green on the right, there's a nice green on the right, but it was being fenced, who put up fence right up to the pier. We can conclude these people have never sit together in a meeting to look at this problem here. Everybody was focusing on their specific problem and did their best to achieve their own separate objectives. Next. Okay, go back, please. We are not here yet. Okay. Another aspect which I have not a slide here is another problem is the loss of wisdom. Once in a discussion group, a difficult problem on education was discussed. The professor within the group swiftly interjected, "What are the parameters? I can do the correlation to analyze and solve this." As if he already knows the answer regardless of the question, and his answer would quickly solve the problem. This quick fix mentality, assuming if the phenomenon can be reduced to few parameters, a solution can quickly be found, signifies on the one hand an air of arrogance. On the other hand, it shows that he could not care less to understand the whole issue or even to identify the important parameters himself. To me, the episode also symbolizes the loss of wisdom, that is the ability to empathize, to elegantly arrive at a meaningful understanding of a phenomenon, and humbly to be open to the idea that whatever solutions we try might have pitfalls and fail. Okay, next. Another problem we can infer is the loss of big picture mentality. The story of the blind man and the elephant tells another crisis brought about by reductionist paradigm, the loss of capacity to think big. Thinking big is needed in high-level decision-making, in creativity, in solving real-world problems. A problem, be it of personal or national nature, seldom arises out of nowhere. There is a myriad of contributing factors leading to it. It is the ability to think beyond the problem itself. Similarly, to achieve an objective, it requires the working of interrelated factors that must not escape attention. To illustrate this point, I would like to narrate a metaphoric tale of a man and his 3 sons. There was a man who had 3 sons. He hoped all his sons grow up to be useful people. Once they reach adulthood, he said to them, "Go out on a journey for a year and be a useful person." So this is a challenge being thrown. Be a useful person. You go out for a year. The first son immediately went off to the world and tried to be useful. The second son hesitated and asked the father, what do you mean by being useful? Can you be more specific?" The father said, "Well, go and find 10,000 poor people." So he went off to find poor people who are in need. The third son was still thinking and asked, "I need to be more specific. How do you help poor people?" The father said, "If you have wealth, you can help poor people." So the third son got up and said, "I will do my best to find wealth." So off went the third son to find wealth. After a year, all 3 came back. The father asked, "Now tell me, what have you done?" First son said, "I went to a village. The people didn't know how to read, so I taught them to read. The poor in the village didn't have enough food, so I persuaded the rich to help the poor. Once I found a donkey stuck in the mud, I used all my strength to pull it out." The father smiled and said, "You have been useful." The second son explained, "You told me to find poor people. I went on a journey from town to town, trying to find them. Wherever I found them, I record their names and addresses. Now I have in my hand the names of 10,000 poor people and where to find them in order to help them." The father said, "Yes, you managed to find the poor. Good, but have you been useful to them?" Shamefully, the son said, "Not really. I was busy finding them." "Well, as you specified." The third son told his story. "I went to a village. They said there is a gold mine in the land, but it is a long journey. So I traveled for a long time. Finally, I found all the gold, and here all this gold is the result of my quest." Looking at all the gold, the father asked, "With all this gold, have you been useful to anybody?" The third son said, "No, I didn't have the time yet. I was busy finding gold, as you instructed me to find wealth." You see, the first son was useful because he never had restrictive definition to the word useful. It's up to him to decide how to be useful. The definition of useful is big. It can be what his moral values dictate of the situation and context, and he can respond to his context fast. The second and third son was told of the specifics of what and how to be useful, too specific that they lost sight of the overall purpose of being useful. Their definition of being useful had been reduced merely to those criteria identified by his father. This brings me back to the issue of education, both higher and lower education. When teachers are told specifically what to do and students are dictated in detail the outcome of what they should be, we lose the human wonders of creativity, freedom, and thinking big. Think about outcome-based learning. Think about the numerous auditing and reporting required. Think of all the mapping, tick boxes, and flowcharts we have to adhere to. Then it shouldn't be a wonder anymore if society complains about our students' lack of critical and analytical thinking, creativity, and big picture mentality. Next. Another problem would be the loss of wonderment in science and education in general. Science begins with a sense of wonder. At least that's the way it used to be. We are amazed by natural phenomena and proceed to know more about it. Imagine the excitement of children looking at dragonflies. They are truly excited to explore all about it. But what if all they get from school, right off the bat, is endless biological hypotheses and chemical formula due to the reductionist approach of science, fragmenting phenomena into different domains? James Lovelock, the writer of Gaia theory, lamented the loss of enjoyment in science. He described he first fall in love with science through raw childhood experience. But due to the separation between knowledge and experience, school becomes so unbearably dull. Students can be motivated to learn anything if they start with the sense of wonder and excitement. A student might go headlong into mechanical physics once they fall in love with a car after seeing how it runs smoothly in real life. But imagine introducing a car by teaching the boys' law, the driving system, the braking system, the steering system separately, without first he has the overall picture of what a car is or what a car can do. Surely he would find learning dull and boring. Next, please. Another aspect of the problem that might arise out of reductionism is loss of empathy. I have to apologize for singling out those who are trained in the physical sciences and engineering, but there are further evidences that reductionist mode of thinking do away with the metaphysical forms. This is not difficult to imagine. Those who are trained in these disciplines would eventually have diminished their humanistic quality for empathy. This actually has been shown in some studies. Billington found out that the majority of students choosing to study the physical sciences have lower empathy. In 2015, an article by Lewis cited a study by Chato et al. And concluded quite harshly, engineering students cared nothing for other human beings' feeling and had a few of their own. They were cold-hearted and uncaring, remorselessly human machines. By contrast, the medical students were warm and bustling with empathy and love. Again, I apologize. This is not an attack from one discipline to another. This is just something that we could think about. We might now begin to question our higher education system, which for several years has been occupied by people from scientific and engineering background. One would be tempted to conclude all the complaints of higher education thus would be a result of specific mindset of the reductionistic training these people went through. Next. Another problem is the rise of bureaucracy. When a task is broken down into its constituent parts, there is a tendency to create connection in a linear fashion. First, fill in a form, then a section of need to approve it. The next process will be handled yet by a different unit to focus on, say, the viability aspect. And then it's proceed to a unit that look at the legal aspect. And then another unit will be handling the economic aspect of it. Eventually, a single task will have to go through a linear progression that will require extra man-hour and manpower. Okay, this leads to another aspect of reductionism, which is called Taylorism. Okay, Taylorism is a method developed by Frederick Taylor to increase productivities of manufacturing factories in 1909. It is also called scientific management. Instead of many workers each making a chair from start to finish, this approach requires a worker to focus on specific tasks in the process of making a chair. A worker will work on cutting wood into shapes, another will develop the structural frame, another will put all the accessories, another will do the finishing. This is reductionism in craftsmanship. The task is broken down into separate components and dealt with independently. The result is impressive, productivity and efficiency improved. Yet, this linear process kills creativity and passion. Each worker would not have a clear idea what his work would end up be, and no single person in the factory knows how to make a chair anymore. The rise of depression due to the loss of meaning in a workplace is something we can all relate today. This has been highlighted by Herbert Marcuse in the One-Dimensional Man, in his book One-Dimensional Man. The tragedy is when Taylorism is applied in education, we see the rise of red tapes and bureaucracy in universities and education organizations that aim to produce insan, not a chair. Okay, I would like to conclude from the examples above. We can identify the red flags when we can say that reductionism has been dominating our educational system. Okay, first we have excessive bureaucracy and red tapes. We have too much reliance in numerical index and ranking, for example, GDPA, CGPA, QS, MIRA. Too many processes, reports, and audits, ISO, audit this and audit that. Too many components and subcomponents, for example, SDG 17. I have my criticism again, the way we approach sustainability through SDG 17, but this might be for another talk. When there is a standardized outcome, for example, OBE, core competency, KPI, and when we have too many flowcharts, tables, and tick boxes. When we have many hierarchical levels in organizations, we have committee, task force, subcommittees, so on and so forth. We have unimpactful outcomes, increasing societal and environmental crisis, as if we had done nothing. We have people working in silos, unable to come together. We have highly complex processes for otherwise simple tasks. Now people are complaining about the curriculum being too complex and arising out of our approach in HOTS, so on and so forth. Okay. Next. So what are the alternatives? Now we look at how people have been trying to overcome this problem in reductionism. Okay. We might have been duped for centuries that reductionist method is the best method to explain and do everything. To some, it is the only paradigm there is. Nevertheless, alternatives have been loud and clear. There are many attempts to rectify this skew towards reductionist left-brain dominance. We will now look briefly at this. First is the philosophy of phenomenology. When reductionism does away with metaphysics, essentially what is discarded is the human experience of a phenomena, how people feel, their sentiment, perception, and intuition. This is unfortunate, as these aspects of humans all contribute to how we make sense of the world and how we react to it. We rarely make decisions based only on empirical evidence. For example, when we want to go on a long journey, the reductionist mind would reduce the choice perhaps to two determining factors, namely time and cost. However, we would always make choice on the whole phenomena of traveling, the scenery, the need to pass by the place where we first met our love, or to pass through the town with historical charm that we love, and many other non-tangible factors. Therefore, there has been a conscious effort to bring back all human faculties into the way we understand the world. Phenomenology is a type of research that seeks to explain the nature of things through the way people experience them, rather than fixating on specific observable parameters, often attributed to Heidegger and Husserl, for it's translated literally as the study of phenomena. In other words, it's the study of the meaning these things or phenomena have in the minds of individuals. In education, it is important to understand how students and teachers experience their process of learning. Their emotive and psychological responses shouldn't be left out. It is a unique journey for individual students. That is why standardized outcome is at odds with phenomenological approach in education. Phenomenology does not put forward anything before and during the research process. It does not give explanation or logical inference for situations. Phenomenology is only interested in an existent situation that is imaginative or real-life experience. It does not deal with the causality and results of things. Phenomenology is concerned with an individual perception. It focuses on only the description of an individual's perception. The second thing that we can discuss is system thinking. Reductionist approach treat the solution to a problem in a linear fashion, often identification, analysis, synthesis, and application. This linearity does not allow for feedback loop. Problems arising of these are many. No improvement, no tweaking, no adaptation in the process. The alternative is to adopt a process where there would be a loop to provide feedback to the system, and this loop can come from anywhere in the system. It looks more like a web of interconnecting things. It is a system of thinking about systems instead of collection of fragmented components. The basic tenet of this approach is that a phenomenon is more than the sum of its parts. That is what makes it antithesis to reductionist approach to the world. Next, I'm going very fast over this discussion. Ian McGilchrist believes that the role of fables, stories, and narratives. So the third thing is storytelling. He believes that the role of fables, stories, and narratives was the way early humans captured the richness of phenomenon. Storytelling is quite different from writing a technical report or scientific paper. We can almost correlate intelligence and wisdom with the ability to tell a good story. In stories, the intangible, the metaphysics, the transcendence would all help humans communicate a phenomenon holistically. The result of our mechanistic and reductionist approach in our knowledge system in higher education or in school is the inability for students and scholars alike, is the loss of skill of telling a good narrative. In academia of late, the craze to write scientific journal, academic type of writing is not good for my field of architecture, because in architecture, if we were to trace the seminal works, the evolution of ideas are through books, essays, manifestos, and exhibition. The ability to tell a story was key to the development of architectural field. When I suggested to the faculty to start a magazine publication, non-peer-reviewed, essay-like writing channels, some of the reactions I see from scholars are quite telling. People have no idea of, we are not comfortable anymore of writing essays, stories, and books. Okay. There are many other ways of, overcoming this reductionist tendency. For example, religions and spirituality. Okay. I would also like to talk about design thinking. People realize that the system, the feedback loop when we are trying to solve a problem is very important, and this can be captured in design thinking, where when a solution is proposed, we would try it out in the real world, and the feedback of the real world will go back into the thinking process. And design thinking, the word design is used is quite interesting. It has been promoted by Stanford Design School. When I visited the school, it looks like an architectural studio where people from different disciplines, from business, from accounting, from engineering, from arts, sit together to try to solve a problem. And this is very, very important in overcoming reductionism, overcoming working in silos. Okay. And perhaps if nothing else work, what we can do is lose the shackles. I mean, do away with all these, restrictive mechanism, tools, and process, or at least put a balance, put a control to it, so that the soft qualities of human experience is not lost. Okay? I believe through that we need reductionist mind as much as we need the holistic mind. There are places and times for each of these. However, there is the dark tendencies that drive the schism between the two, and the winner are those who take advantage of the fragments of their own selfish gain. So there I would like to end my talk, and thank you very much for your attention, and perhaps maybe we can have a bit of dialogue or discussion. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much to Associate Professor Dr. Muhammad Fakri. Now let's proceed with the Q&A session. I'm opening the floor to ask any questions to our speaker.
Prof. Can I ask question?
Yes, please proceed.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Muhammad Fakri. It's very, very insightful and interesting presentation, and I can relate so much with my research, my everyday life as an academician. So I'm Dr. Dia from Geography Department. So I'm doing research on social deviance, domestic violence by using grounded theory, storytelling. So I would like to ask quite simple question. Is So as an academician, do you have can you see or do you see any mechanism that can deal with this reductionism approach in your everyday life, or perhaps you experience, oh okay, this is the way to deal with reductionism. So as for myself, I experience, like, for example, doing grounded uh, qualitative research. You know, some of my students have been asked by the examiners kind of question like, oh, do you even, I mean, do we have storytelling method? So that kind of question, for example. And also some other question like, why your research aims are so abstract, or why your objectives have no variables. So those kind of, you know, question which is very I would say is very more to measurable approach or more to positivist kind of approach. So I encounter this kind of problem many times, and I would like to ask you, perhaps you have, you know, what kind of mechanism on how to deal with this as an academician. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Zuriatun Fazilah.
Yes, it's quite
Yeah,
long name.
thank you for the question. I think what you are sharing there is almost the everyday experience even I have in my experience as an academician. Um, it is something that how to respond to that is quite difficult unless you have to discuss at the higher level of knowledge. You have to discuss in terms of epistemology. You have to discuss in terms of the philosophy behind those questions. So it's not, I know it's not an easy task because we are in the same game plan. You It's difficult to answer it practically on the same level. We have to go a bit, maybe read a bit about epistemology, read a bit about phenomenology, and how does this discussion try to overcome those questions. There are a lot of criticism against those kind of questions. So perhaps we have to go a bit deeper on that. That's why this kind of discussion is needed. So when we discuss among different disciplines or different mindset, we know that uh, there are other games, there are other rules and regulations when we discuss about knowledge. The problem is when we are not aware that there are other ways of looking at things. So I believe that is why it took me years to try to understand this problem and what was really the problem. So perhaps that's the best way I can answer. I'm not my background is not geography, so to specifically answer the question might be not in my position to give you specific answers on that.
Sorry, Doctor, I would like to echo your point. Is that means we need to have more space of conversation and open up discussion on this around the epistemological and
Yes,
phenomenal. Yeah. Okay.
yes,
Thank you.
yeah. I believe. Otherwise, if it is not a problem if other rules and mindset does not encroach on our field, we could be free. But now we know that, even like I shared earlier, the encroachment of scientific mind into humanities is actually a real problem. But people have started to realize that this is a problem, and there are literatures on trying to dealing with this. Okay, I know the reductionist mindset might sit very well in the physical science, when you're doing engineering, chemistry, biology. it's a perfect fit for them. But when we try to look at the real world, even sometimes science is at odds of reality. When we go into the real world, you cannot simply solve a problem just by specific discipline, just by using physics or just by using chemistry or biology or just an engineering solution. We have to understand the whole phenomena of how people react to solutions. Okay. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Do we have any more questions?
Yes, Assalamu alaikum. Good morning to everyone. My name is Aruyung, but you can call me Lazba. I really want to thank you for this discussion. It's really in depth, and I think I can relate. I'm from the field of psychology. I'm a clinical psychologist, and in our research, we use phenomenological approach. If I were to add to what you're saying, sir, based on Dr. Zuriatun's question, sometimes we have students present and they don't have variables because it is more of exploration. It is more of understanding the phenomenon. It is more of trying to understand those other things that could emerge from the phenomenon. So I could relate. And also, we use reductionism in psychology. Is for us to break down this big, now people use big mental words, big mental concepts. People just in their daily lives, they use big psychological terms and you're scared. So the idea behind reductionism in psychology is to break down this big concepts or big ideas into smaller bits for the client or for the individual to understand, and in research for the researchers to understand that what are those simple small components and factors that work together to define this particular psychological issue or this psychological concept. So I really want to thank you for this eye-opening discussion, and I hope that probably just like you've recommended, if we could have a session where everybody from all walks of field research perspective come together and see how we could integrate based on other people's research methodologies, how it could be integrated in our own research. Probably we could see things differently. I know now in psychology we do a lot of AI, a lot of technology integrated psychotherapy because we have to, because that's the in thing, and that is definitely not our field. And let me say this as a last sentence. Recently in my head I'm thinking maybe at a point in time robots will need psychotherapy, because I know it's funny, right? But then the way AI is going, they are building in emotions to an extent. I know it's to an extent, not in depth. But if we were to really look into the future and really look into what the future may hold based on what we understand from research, I think in psychology now we have to move ahead and look real deep, and we need to work with researchers in bionics, researchers in robotics to understand this concept, to understand what the future may hold for mental health, what the future may hold for possible robots needing psychological support, at a point in time. And maybe, just maybe, they might develop unique personalities. Yes, it may sound funny, but then who knows? So I think this discussion, if it can be moved forward, I think we will all benefit. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Miss Falashadi. I'm sorry if I pronounce it wrongly. Well, interesting idea there. Instead of letting the left brain dominant worldview encroaching on the right brain dominance, it's reverse. It's quite interesting. But we hope to see something from your side of the story later on.
Dr. Fariha, ada soalan tu.
Betul. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. We have two questions in the message, Dr. Fakri. Okay. Number one is a question from Prof Ng of University Malaya. What are some pragmatic approaches that all of us can initiate to counteract the overdose of reductionism?
Okay. Thank you, Prof. Prof Ng. He is a good friend of mine. In fact, I learned a lot from him as well. He himself is a physical scientist, He's a radiologist from I think I need to introduce him actually. And I think even the answer to his question, he already know. He has always been talking about the loss of polymath. So perhaps, Prof, maybe like you have always been saying that we need to start to bring in polymath in our academic system, that people who think beyond their own domain and starts to have this, people from science and engineering should start to have this artistic aspect in them, and on the other hand, people on the artistic side of academic world would start to have understanding of the scientific principle in their own way, from their own perspectives. So maybe it's a big question, Prof. I cannot answer it, and you already know some of the answer. So maybe if Prof Ong can share some of his view on this. Prof. It's okay. Okay, maybe he prefers to just to ask the question.
Prof already switched on his camera.
Yes, Prof. If you like to say a few words.
Hello, Prof.
Prof nak switch on the speaker kot.
Oh,
Terus
Can you hear
terkeluar.
me?
oh
Yeah,
yes,
you're here, right?
Prof.
Traveling, I'm in the lounge waiting for my flight. Interestingly, Dr. Zaky, your talk is interesting. I really, we all of us here as a community of clinicians or others, we should meet more often to discuss. It's like in the past, the conference, as Francis Bacon mentioned, it's not like today's conference we talk, but meet together, have some teh tarik and discuss and work out something where the arts, social science, and the physical scientists can meet together. This is pretty rare. Even in my university, we haven't got this opportunity where we talk about interdisciplinary research, but we don't get together and share our thoughts. I think I would like to encourage this, to meet informally and discuss, and where we can brainstorm to move forward, listen to each other's view, and find out from others. For example, I'm also learning a lot from the sociologists, the humanities. Again, this is a first step to move forward, one of the pragmatic approach, and then we see where we go from there. We have to start somewhere. Okay, this is my
Thank
short.
you.
All right, thank you so much, Prof. We have one more question, Dr. Zaky. Sorry, Dr. Fakri. From Shakina's Desa, she asked, could you please elaborate, as you mentioned in the talk, on the potential red flags or concerns associated with OBE?
Thank you very much. This is something that I have felt strongly over the years. My background is architecture, so creativity is a very important aspect in our teaching and learning. And one of the characteristics of creativity is that we would like the students to surprise us, that we ourselves, we don't know the answer, but through creativity, new things might be found. So when the outcome has already been dictated, this is what you should be, this is the competency that you need, where would the surprise come from? Because the outcome has already been decided very early on, and this is another problem. Who decides on the outcome? What are the agenda behind the outcome? Why are there only these 10 outcomes? People are beautiful. People can do many things. They can achieve amazing things. They can go to the moon. They can write Mozart and Bach. But why do these 10 outcomes? Who sit and decide to provide on these 10 outcomes? This is actually a very strong political argument over in the US since OBE was introduced. But it seems that the discussion escapes our dialogue or our dialectic over here when we draft up our education. And if you try to Google OBE on the internet, most of the literature comes from Malaysia. Even those countries that initiated the idea of OBE, it is not the big thing anymore. Okay, and some countries actually do away with OBE. And the unfortunate thing is in Malaysia, when OBE is being mechanized, it starts to have this, mapping, the way of mapping things, the way of constructing question, deconstructing exam question. This has all the crippling effect on creativity. The way creativity in human develop is not linear, it's not mechanical. When someone produce a poem in poetry, you cannot really ask him what are the processes behind this. It's why it's called creativity. It's created out of the human psyche. So that is the basic complaint in OBE that I have. But as you know that the tendency to standardize, the tendency to audit, that means we need some mechanism where this can be checked and double checked in a proper document. But eventually the real outcome is lost when students, we have complaints of our younger generation don't have creativity, don't have passion anymore. So basically that's the overall complaint I have about OBE. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. Okay. I personally have one question, Doctor. So we often hear about parents complaining about how difficult the subjects are in school, right? And I read once the justification provided by the Ministry of Education on why they decide to make the subjects very challenging. No, not to say very challenging. Challenging in a sense, they have to set it on that standard so that we are not left behind in terms of PISA and whatnot. So what would be one of the things that we can do to bridge the gap between, perhaps parents' lack of understanding and also the justification by MOE, because it seems like there is this missing puzzle in between, in both sides. Miscommunication somehow along the way that makes parents, they do not understand why they keep on complaining about the difficulty, yada, yada. But then when I read the justification by MOE, I understand why the subject is as such in terms of difficulty level and whatnot. Doctor, what do you say?
Okay, maybe it is not in my position to comment on this, but I realize I as a parent myself see the same problem. The thing is, when we are so focused in a specific way of doing things, to us it will be very clear because there are specific manual of doing things, but the way people or children think, is different. We have lost touch in how people making sense of the world. When we make sense of the world, we do not scope it down to few parameters, hypotheses, and how these things work. People can arrive at an understanding in different ways, and maybe not very specifically expressed in a specific way that the curriculum has specified. And one thing is that who specified the curriculum? What are the concept behind when they construct the question? What are the mindset behind them? This is something that has not been scrutinized. If there is a complaint and there are evidence that things are not working, to be adamant in saying that what you are doing is right, to me that is blatant arrogance on the side of KPM. Okay, you cannot provide an explanation that will make sense. Whatever explained by KPM will not make things easy for the students and the parents. Would it? It wouldn't, right? So as if they are saying that, okay, what we are doing is right. Just like the episode I shared earlier, okay, this is a bit, when I attended the discussion, to be specific, on education. So the one who, the prominent scholar who was drafting the education for the nation said, that our education system is perfectly scientific. We have this cognitive, we have this psychomotor we have this affective, and it can be assessed differently. The problem is when the teacher in the school do not know how to bring to bridge the gap. My question is, who chopped them up? You are the one who break them scientifically, as if you have the answer of how to stitch them up, but you don't know the answer. You throw it back to the teachers, the common teachers, who has been struggling trying to do the stitching. So eventually, what you get, maybe not a real person, but a Frankenstein monster. You try to stitch together different parts of human mind mechanically, and you yourself don't know how to stitch them, and you blame the teachers who have no idea of how to bring this back together. So it's really breach on the side of arrogance. I'm sorry if I'm saying this in public forum, but it is what it is. Yes.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much. Any more questions from the participants?
Can I share a little bit of my experience, which is quite relevant with the OBE and also with the current social experience in Malaysia, atmosphere in Malaysia?
Yes,
So,
yes.
okay. Because I involve heavily in MQA documentation, so I can see the problem, and also I do the grounded research about social deviant. I did a in-depth interview with a few teenagers, which currently in certain institution for 2 years because they get extramarital relationship, they got pregnant um, before 18. So the findings of the study is because they don't have skills to make decision, and they cannot understand the consequences of the decision. And from that study, from that interview, so partly we conclude that our research team conclude that they don't have wisdom skills. So our teenagers in Malaysia, they don't have wisdom skills. So wisdom skills partly is about making decision, the right decision, and stick to that decision. And also, currently I'm reading this book, the Free Your Mind. So this book also argue how important to have wisdom skill so that we can avoid ourselves to being manipulated. So that is the point. But wisdom skills cannot be measured. So during my process, calculating all the OBE, Bloom taxonomy and everything, I can say that there is no wisdom skills, and it's more like a separation between the speaker's point just now, between body, mind, also no soul, no tiada kejiwaan. So it's no spiritual, no kindness, values. So I can say that along the process that I get involved in OBE for MQA documentation. So yeah, that's my experience, and it's actually proven from the study, and we can see it's actually we can see from the social problems in Malaysia as well. So it's a big issue, and it's really need an attention from the stakeholders, from ourselves as academician. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Doctor.
Thank you so much, Doctor, for sharing. Any more questions?
There's the attendance thing ada dekat message, those who might want to fill in. That's for UPSI staff. For the SPD, please fill it in. The judges not remind.
Okay. It seems that no more questions, right? Dr. Bibi, can we conclude? All right. Okay. So thank you so much. So on behalf of PEKA, UPSI, and all the participants, I would like to express our sincere gratitude to Dr. Mohd Fakri for taking the time to be with us today, and also for for delivering such an engaging and thought-provoking sharing session. I myself enjoyed very much. So your contribution have enriched our gathering and have left us with much to reflect on, as academics. Thank you so much again, Dr. Mohd Fakri. So we hope to meet all of you again in the next series of PEKA Academic Talk, inshallah.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Dr.
Pekka.
Thank you so much.
Attention.
Right,
I
thank you.
apologize for any, hard feelings that I might have caused. So thank you very much.
Right, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zaky. Thank you. All right, thank you, everyone. Assalamualaikum.
Salam.